Len Arents is also very annoyed about the discount rate, and he essentially says, we shouldn't try to just push the solutions or the problems down the line and have others solve it. We should actually solve them ourselves. He talks about the Hudson River and say we shouldn't have polluted the Hudson River and then only have to clean it up 100 years later. We should presumably not have done it in the first place. Now, in principle, of course, I would agree we shouldn't do anything bad, but let's just think about this all the way through. Of course, that's the same thing as saying our forefathers shouldn't have used fossil fuels because that would have generated global warming. Now, if they hadn't done that, that would have been wonderful in the sense we wouldn't have the problem of global warming. But it would be terrible in the way that we wouldn't have virtually anything else. Remember, this has been the engine of growth over the last 200 years, basically brought about pretty much everything we like about civilization today, and of course also the possibility of anything that we've seen from the Industrial Revolution, both in the developed, but certainly also in the developing world, as we've seen, for instance, in China over the last 10 or 20 years when they lifted out 2 or 300 million people from poverty with fossil fuels. So it's not just that there's a benefit. Absolutely, if we ask our forefathers to don't do stuff that will impact negatively in the future, that would have been good in the sense of global warming been missing, but it would have been terrible in the sense that we would not have had all the amenities and all the opportunities that the modern world affords us. And that's why we need to realize this is a trade-off like most other things in the world. And that's exactly what a discount rate allows us to do. We say, yes, the future is important, but the present is also important. And so we got to ask ourselves, how do we make that trade-off? I'm totally on with the discussion of saying we need to talk about that trade-off, but to not recognize that the trade-off is there is not helpful. And that brings us back to the discussion that I had with Ray Pierre from Chicago, essentially pointing out that a high discount rate makes much more sense because it's what we do, and it's also how most people are willing to think about investing in the future. And it's very unlikely that we would be ever able to do something along the lines of Nicholas Stern having a discount rate of very, very little, like 0.1%. And we certainly don't act like that in the present. So again, I recognize the question from Len, but I really think we need to recognize this is a question of a trade-off, and a trade-off we need to be honest about, and one that would show that a 3% discount rate, which is not high, not low, but in the middle, is the right one.